Evan Parker had always considered himself a responsible early summer guy. He wasn't the type who misplaced things, at least not on purpose. Keys, always in the left jacket pocket. Wallet, right back pocket. Phone, death grip in his hand like it contained state secrets rather than grocery lists, weather apps, and the occasional embarrassing search history involving, why is my left ear making weird clicking sounds at night? But this morning in Cedar Glen, Colorado, the universe had different plans for him. It was one of those early June mornings when the sun hit the sidewalks at a perfect angle, bright, warm, and almost smug about how good it looked on the pastel storefronts downtown. Evan was walking down Oak Ridge Avenue, trying to balance an iced coffee in one hand and his phone in the other, while his brain replayed the 7 things he needed to get done before noon. He was dressed like every other small-town millennial attempting efficiency: light denim shirt sleeves rolled up, fitted khaki shorts, comfortable sneakers, hair brushed but still slightly messy because humidity had its own opinions. And then it happened. A gentle summer breeze, nothing alarming, nothing cinematic, fluttered through town, rustling flags in front of the post office and sending a swirl of dust across the curb. Evan didn't even notice it until it blew the tiny paper napkin wrapped around his iced coffee straw. He tried grabbing it midair with the same reflexes of a man who had not done cardio since last fall. His hand jerked, the coffee jolted, he overcorrected, and his phone flew. Not dropped. Not slipped. Launched. A clean, graceful arc through the warm Colorado sunlight, as though the phone were an Olympic diver determined to show off. No, no, no. Why today? Evan lunged forward just in time to watch his phone bounce off the concrete and skitter across the sidewalk like a tiny, expensive hockey puck. It spun once. Then twice. Then, in theatrical defiance, slid into a storm drain grate. Face down. Resting there tauntingly like it was reconsidering its relationship with him. Evan froze. He stared at the drain. The drain stared back. The iced coffee straw wrapper, the cause of all this pain, fluttered by innocently as if saying, oops. A couple walking their beagle across the street slowed down to witness the tragedy unfolding in real time. The beagle looked genuinely concerned. The humans looked entertained. Evan muttered, of course. Perfect. Great. Awesome. His signature trifecta of frustration and resignation. He dropped to his knees beside the drain grate, peering through the slots like a hopeful archaeologist discovering something he desperately wished he didn't lose in the first place. His phone sat inside, uncracked but undeniably unreachable, as though mocking him. Sunlight glimmered over it, adding insult to injury. Just as Evan began debating whether he could reasonably pry the grate off with his bare hand spoiler, he could not. A shadow approached. Lose something? A voice said, cheerful, curious, and slightly amused. Evan looked up. Standing above him was a woman carrying a reusable grocery tote and wearing sunglasses on her head like she lived in a summer commercial. Mid-20s, relaxed posture, friendly smile with the kind of warmth that made strangers feel like they were characters in her day rather than obstacles. She had sandy blonde hair tied back loosely and wore a light blue t-shirt, denim capris, and open-toed sandals. Her name, he would later learn, was Hannah Cole, a new resident in Cedar Glen. At this moment, she was just the stranger who would see him at his worst. My dignity, Evan said, pointing at the grate. And my phone. Hannah leaned down, peering in. Oof. That's down there. Yup. How did it? Physics, betrayal, humidity, Evan replied. She laughed, and the sound echoed lightly down the sunny street. Well, good news, Hannah said brightly. I'm extremely good at saving people from embarrassing predicaments. Evan blinked. Are you, professionally trained? Or is this a self-issued certification? Self-issued, but laminated. Before Evan could form a response, she was already scanning the area like she was plotting a heist. Her eyes caught something near the entrance of the hardware store. She jogged over and returned with a long-handled grabber tool, one of those things older folks used to reach high pantry shelves, except she wielded it like a hero brandishing a sword. Evan stared. You just borrowed that? She shrugged. Mr. Holbrook owes me for helping him sort out the seed aisle last week. He won't mind. She knelt next to him. What followed was a scene worthy of a slapstick highlight reel. Hannah maneuvered the grabber through the slats of the drain, attempting to grip the phone. Evan coached from above like a nervous parent teaching a toddler how to ride a bike. Left a little, no, your left, tilt, watch the corner, oh. Careful, no pressure. He flinched every time the grabber scraped the concrete. Hannah snorted. You act like your phone has feelings. It does. It remembers my passwords. Finally, with a triumphant little grunt, she pinched the phone between the grabber tool and slowly lifted it toward the opening. Except, a small rock caught the edge. The phone slipped. Hannah gasped. Evan screamed internally. She lunged. He lunged. They bumped heads, both recoiling in synchronized pain. But miraculously, the phone landed halfway up the grate instead of falling deeper. Evan sagged with relief. I can fix the head bump. I can't fix losing my entire digital life. Hannah steadied the grabber, carefully reaching again. This time, with surgeon-level precision, she pulled the phone out through the top of the grate and lifted it into the sunlight. It was slightly dusty around the edges but otherwise perfectly operational. A little wet from the humidity, but alive. She handed it over with a smile that could have closed a rainbow sail. Returned. With a smile, she said jokingly. Evan's brain misfired briefly, caught between gratitude and embarrassment. I don't know how to repay you. You already did, she grinned. I got to watch the funniest thing I'll see all week. He laughed despite himself. They both stood up, brushing off their clothes. Summer breeze rustled Hannah's hair lightly while a car rolled past playing 90s country music faintly through open windows. Cedar Glen was small-town Americana in full color today. Bright sidewalks, clean shop windows, picket fence yards, and hanging baskets overflowing with pink petunias. You new in town? Evan asked. Moved here 2 weeks ago. Welcome to Cedar Glen. Sorry about the first impression of me crawling around storm drains. Hannah smiled warmly. Honestly, it's kind of perfect. People here seem real. A silence settled between them, not awkward, just pleasantly unscripted. You want to grab a lemonade at Sunny's? Evan said, gesturing to the corner cafe. Hannah nodded. Sure, but only if you promise not to drop anything else on the way. No promises. They began walking together down the sunlit street, Evan trying very hard to hold his phone with both hands like it was a newborn baby. And somewhere behind them, the beagle from earlier barked approvingly. The sun had climbed higher now, filtered through the broad leaves of the maples lining Oak Ridge Avenue. Cedar Glen's downtown exuded that gentle, small-town energy, pastel storefronts with hand-painted signs, flower boxes bursting with petunias and marigolds, the faint hum of a fountain in the square, and the occasional metallic clang of a bike bell echoing down the cobblestone-like sidewalk. The air carried the warmth of early summer, a hint of lingering rain, and the soft, comforting scent of freshly baked bread from Baker's Corner on the next block. Evan Parker walked side by side with Hannah Cole, gripping his phone a little tighter than necessary, still shaken from the ordeal but exhilarated in a way that only narrowly avoiding total technological catastrophe can elicit. His khaki shorts were slightly damp where he had brushed the low-hanging leaves near the storm drain, and his denim shirt bore faint smudges of dust. Yet his hazel eyes sparkled, alive with both amusement and the unspoken realization that sometimes embarrassing mishaps can lead to surprisingly good things. Hannah, balancing the reusable grocery tote against her hip, laughed gently at his overcautious grip. You know, she said, if you treat your phone like it's a fragile antique, people might start wondering if you're harboring gold or some national secret in there. Evan smirked, adjusting his grip. That would explain why I panic at the smallest bump. My life is in there. He gestured to the device, wiggling it slightly. Contacts, photos, my entire caffeine intake history, very serious business. Hannah chuckled, the kind of soft, contagious laugh that made Evan feel less like a spectacle and more like part of a scene in one of those quaint, small-town feel-good movies he secretly enjoyed. She opened the door to Sunny's Café, a corner establishment with checkered red and white awnings and a tiny bell above the door that jingled whenever someone entered. The smell of citrus, brewed coffee, and baked cookies hit him immediately. Inside, the cafe was a mix of locals. An older man reading the newspaper in the corner, a young couple arguing playfully over which muffin to order, a barista with a nose ring expertly pouring cappuccinos. The wooden floors bore the patina of hundreds of footsteps, and sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced lazily in the warm air. They found a small table near the window. Evan pulled out a chair with a little too much force, making a comical squeak, and sat down. Hannah smiled indulgently. You're going to need a stiff drink after that ordeal, she teased. Lemonade. Nothing stiff. Just lemonade, please. And maybe a medal for survival, Evan replied, settling into his seat like a man recovering from a minor war. Hannah signaled the barista. 2 lemonades, please. While waiting, they started talking, their conversation meandering like a lazy creek, bouncing between small-town trivia, favorite hiking trails around the Rockies, and the absurdity of the morning. Evan recounted the story of the phone's dramatic dive, embellishing a little for comedic effect. Hannah laughed at the exact moments he had hoped she would, and Evan realized that even though the embarrassment was fresh, sharing it made it almost funny. At one point, Evan leaned back in his chair and sighed, gazing out the window at the bright streets. You know, I think, sometimes I get so wrapped up in what could go wrong that I forget how unpredictable life can be in good ways too. Hannah touched her glass to his. And to laughing at ourselves. That's the key. Evan took a thoughtful sip. The lemonade was tart, sweet, and utterly refreshing. Somehow, it perfectly mirrored the morning's chaos turned joy. He realized that losing his phone, even for a brief, terrifying moment, had opened him up to a new connection, an unplanned friendship, a story he would retell with humor and gratitude for years to come. As they talked, the cafe's patrons gradually became a silent audience to the unfolding camaraderie. Mr. Simmons, the elderly man in the corner, glanced up from his newspaper, a soft grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. Across the room, a young mother rearranged her stroller with a knowing nod, perhaps remembering her own moments of minor chaos transformed into unexpected joy. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, scattering tiny petals along the sidewalk. The warm afternoon sun softened, hinting at the approach of golden hour. Evan felt a shift inside himself, a quiet sense of motivation. Life was messy, unpredictable, sometimes ridiculous. But embracing those moments, laughing at them, and allowing new connections to bloom could turn a mishap into a small, perfect adventure. By the time they stood to leave, Evan felt lighter, as if the weight of the morning's embarrassment had been lifted by shared humor and the generosity of a stranger. The phone still safely in his pocket, he glanced at Hannah. I have to say, you made a morning that could have been a disaster into something memorable. She smiled. That's what small towns do. People watch out for each other, sometimes with grabber tools. Evan laughed, realizing that the day, in its odd, slightly absurd way, had already become one of those moments worth remembering. As they stepped out onto the sunlit streets, the golden hour glow bathing Cedar Glen in soft light, Evan Parker understood something simple and profound. Even dropped phones can lead to raised spirits. Even strangers can become friends. And sometimes, the universe's little mishaps are exactly the reminders we need that life, with all its unpredictability, can be funny, joyful, and deeply connecting.
Like and subscribe if you want daily dose of happiness and motivation.